أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. We continue with verse number 3, Surah Nisa. وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع فإن خفتم ألا تعدلوا فواحدة أو ما ملكت أيمانكم ذلك أدنى ألا تعولوا. If you fear that you may not deal justly with the orphans, then marry other women that you like, 2, 3, or 4. But if you fear that you may not treat them fairly, then marry only one. Or from among your slave women, that makes it likelier that you will not be unfair. We discussed the relationship between if you fear that you not be fair with the orphans, which mean orphan girls, and cannot give their rights in marriage, then do not marry them. فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. Then marry other women that you like. Now, about this فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ, there are a couple of views of what it means. فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. 3 possibilities here. Because taba means what is pleasant. So here, one meaning that most of the commentators have mentioned is that what is lawful for you to marry from among women. So what is lawful? Of course, the unlawful are mentioned, like mothers, mother-in-laws, sisters, nephews, nieces. These are the women which are forbidden. So فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ means what is lawful for you. Do not marry orphan girls, but marry the women who are prescribed in the Quran to be lawful. Or it means the women that you like. Again, pleasant here finds its meaning. فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. The women that you like them. You probably have an acquaintance and you like to marry them. This is another meaning. And there is another meaning mentioned by some commentators, is that as many as you like. I mean 2, 3, or 4. مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ, as many as you like. However, the first meaning is certainly the best meaning. مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ, what is lawful, and it goes with the context better. In verse number 127 in this chapter, we have another question, or perhaps a question put to the Prophet, peace be upon him, in an occasion regarding how it is lawful, in what situation is lawful to marry women. يَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ قُلِ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِيهِنَّ وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ فِي يَتَامَى النِّسَاءِ. Apparently, again, this issue of orphan girls have come up. It says they seek your ruling concerning women. Say Allah gives you a ruling concerning them in addition and what is announced to you in the book concerning girl orphans. So it is again referring the one who questions to this verse, that girl orphans, you have to be very cautious. If you think you cannot give them their rights, then you should not approach them. Whom you do not give what has been prescribed for them, and yet you desire to marry them. So Allah has given you this ruling. It's read for you in the book, and about the weak among children. Of course, the weak among children also are probably the orphans who, in different situations, are under guardianship of some of the awliya who may not be willing to give their rights. وَأَن تَقُومُوا لِلْيَتَامَى بِالْقِسْطِ. I advise you again that when it comes to orphans, you have to stand for justice. You have to establish justice. وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِهِ عَلِيمًا. And whatever you do from in terms of good, Allah is aware of that. So this was such an important matter that probably it made a bit of question in mind of some of the people who were used to actually marry girl orphans, and their habits should have been stopped, and they asked the question again. And now, going back to مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ, then it says مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ means while you can marry 2 and 3 and 4. Of course, mathna doesn't mean ithnain, and thulath doesn't mean thalatha. It means 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4. So you can have wives at the same time, 2 or 3 or 4. So it's not, this wow doesn't mean that you can add them together to mean 9. So of course, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4 is addressed to the whole nation. Some of you may marry 2 wives, some of you may marry 3, some of you may marry 4. Why 1 is not mentioned? Because it's redressed now. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً. If you fear that you may not treat them fairly, then marry only 1. Now, the question is about what is the meaning of treating fairly? First of all, the verse is certainly makes the very clear ruling of polygamy. And this has not been, of course, abrogated anywhere in the Quran or by any hadith or by any tradition. So this is a clear ruling of the Quran about polygamy. And of course, although it may hurt some feelings, but it may be sometimes a necessity of the society. And it is according to the nature of human being. So that's why Allah has allowed it, but of course with strict rulings of fairness. And of course, women certainly may not be willing to concede to this, but when a ruling comes which considers the good of the society as a whole rather than individuals, then everyone should submit to it. We have another verse again in the same surah, in Surah An-Nisa, verse 129, which explains what this fairness is. I mean, fairness can have many different meanings. Now, here, does fairness means that you have to be fair in what you tell them, in love, in desire, or things like that? Here, in verse 129, which some people have considered it to be an abrogation of this verse, that God has actually abrogated verse number 3 by verse 129. The verse says, وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ النِّسَاءِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ فَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ وَإِن تُصْلِحُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. You will not be able to be fair between wives, even if you are eager to do so. وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ. Hirs is strong eager that someone wants to do something. So even if you are eager to do that, you cannot do it. However, yet do not turn away from one altogether, leaving her as if in a suspense. But if you act rightly and be God-weary, Allah is indeed all forgiving, all merciful. As I said, some have taken this to be an abrogation of verse number 3, meaning that I told you that you have to be fair. And khiftum alla ta'dilu, if you fear that you cannot make justice, then only one. And this verse tells that you never can make justice, so you have to marry only one. Now, first of all, in this verse, as Tafsir al-Manar mentions, there is an allusion that this is not an abrogation, it's actually, again, confirming the legislation of polygamy by saying فَلَا تَمِيلُ كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. Since you cannot establish fairness totally and wholly, but you do not turn away from one altogether, that means you have 2, 3, 4. You do not turn away from that one that you do not like or do not desire or what, leaving her as if in a suspense. فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. This should not happen. So it means that it's talking about a situation where a man has several wives. Now, here, those who say this is an abrogating verse, it is not possible, or it is not actually, it doesn't make sense that Allah legislates a ruling which is not possible and then abrogate it, isn't it? In verse 3 it says Mathna wa thulatha wa ruba, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4. And in this verse, but if you cannot be fair to them, only one. And in this verse, it says it's impossible for you to be fair. So abrogating what he said before, it doesn't make sense actually. Now, what does this mean? How these two verses can be combined with each other to give us an understanding of fairness? Now, here it says that this fairness is not in feeling, is not in love, it's impossible. It's talking about the psychological matter. This verse number 3 is talking about a social matter. Law. The law is this, but psychologically, yes, I know. But I set a law, and that is that you have to be fair in the treatment. I mean, to be fair in treatment is different from to be fair in feeling. So here it talks about the psychological attitude of a person with 2 or 3 wives. So the negation of man's ability here to be fair actually talks about a specific level of fairness, which is not possible. But the basic fairness, which the verse number 3 is talking about, is possible. And that is, as we have in our narrations, the fairness in treatment in nafaqah. That is certainly possible. So the basic required fairness is if you act rightly and God-weary, and be God-weary. If you act rightly and be God-weary. وَإِن تَتَّقُوا وَتُصْلَحُوا, as in verse 129. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. So Allah forgives the rest. How to act rightly and be God-weary? Treat them equally. Treat them equally, although you may not have equal feeling towards them, but treat them equally and with fairness of nafaqah and other things pertaining to that. Now, either way, the verse is saying that such fairness, verse 129, such fairness is not in human capacity. So at least fear God in how you treat your wives if you have more than one wife. And if you cannot be fearful in that sense and you cannot be fair, then only one. Take only one. So, as I said, Al-Manar says, yet do not turn away from one altogether, leaving her as if in suspense. He says that this command also shows that the verse does not prohibit polygamy altogether. Verse 129, of course. So if you want to summarize, verse 129 describes a universal rule that has to do with human psychology, human feelings, love, things like that. It's impossible to be fair or equally have the same feeling. But the current verse, verse number 3, talks about the legal ruling of polygamy. That is a psychological situation of polygamy, and this is the legal ruling of polygamy. And we have in Hadith Imam as-Sadiq, for example, concerning fair treatment. Imam as-Sadiq said it means with regards to nafaqah, and of course other types of treatments as well. So, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Now, مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, what your hands, what belongs to you. It means what belongs to you, our slave girls. Now, the ruling with the slave girls is also mentioned in details in the Quran, that if there was a slave girl under the care of a person, belongs to a person, then that slave girl is like his wife, if he wants to take her as a wife and have children from them. But their situation is different from situation of Muslim women. Of course, usually slave girls were not Muslims, and then even if they converted to Islam, then they had different rulings as well. But the ruling here is different from the ruling with Muslim women. And of course, nowadays, when I say Muslim women, I mean Muslim free women. I'm not talking about non-Muslim free women. I'm talking about slave girls, which was something quite common at the time. Also, the Quran says that if you cannot marry free women, you can marry slave women with the permission of their owners. And that is maybe something alluded to here as well. And that is when, for example, a slave girl who's not married and who's not taken in marriage by his owner, then the owner can permit her to marry someone else. And then the same thing, they go for to ask for a hand, and the owner would permit. Like, for example, if the father should permit, and then they marry each other. And then the rulings are a bit different from rulings of free women. So, أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Now, the ruling that I mentioned here, I think I have discussed enough about slavery and what did it mean at that time. And it was the zeitgeist of the time. It was the common culture, the mindset. We had two very important mindsets at the time of the Prophet. One was idolatry, which was very strong. Even during the history, this idea of idolatry was so strong. It was the overall understanding of people altogether. It was the overwhelming concept that everyone accepted idolatry. So it was very difficult to fight against it, to try to abolish it. When Ibrahim alayhi salam says, وَجْنُبْنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ, keep me and my children, my sons, to worship idols. So of course, about himself, he is just in humiliation, he's saying that to God. But about his children, he was worried. And in the Quran, أَجَعَلَ الْآلِهَةَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عُجَابٌ. Is he telling that there is only one God? This is very strange. Why? Because this was the current psychological, the current cultural and understanding of the time. So, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, stood firm on that, because that was something he had come to uproot. And when they suggested, okay, we worship Allah and you worship our gods, lakum dinukum waliya din, another current concept was slavery. The Prophet, peace be upon him, of course, and Islam and the whole idea of the Quran is against it and has legislated rulings to abolish it. However, gradually, it was not as important as idolatry, so that even those who believed oppose the religion of God, because it was so common, so widespread, had penetrated into the fabric of financial and social status of the society. It was very difficult. So it allowed it to go, but on the condition that, of course, whenever you commit a sin, you free a slave. If a slave is under your care for several years and has become Muslim, you set them free. And all these things, these are the uphill tasks that Muslims have. So this was going like that. So when we read about these things, about slavery, we shouldn't think that it is something that Islam or any religion or any conscience allow because it's something good. No. It allows because it was something which could not be abolished all at once. It would have caused lots of opposition. And of course, we have modern slavery as well. I mean, people think that they are free, but they have to work like slaves for their employers. I mean, even if they go out of work, they cry, they would love, or they earnestly, they are so eager to come under slavery of an employee, of an employer. So this is not something which has been totally left the society. I mean, especially with regards to the poor. But there is this sense of freedom. Yes, I can do whatever I want. I can go out of this situation at any time. But of course, the urges of life wouldn't allow that. And some people say that, for example, in America, the North was fighting the South against slavery because of slavery. However, we know what happened. Of course, the North was industrial and the South was living on farming, agricultural, and then, of course, the slaves were working in the farms, and in the North, they needed workers in the firms and in the industry. and therefore they wanted these slaves to be free to go to the industry. And of course, their situation did not change much, as we know. Anyhow, that was something out of our discussion, tafsir discussion. So, when we go to فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدًا, it then says ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. This is closer, that you would not exceed the limits. Makes it likelier that you not be unfair. Ta'ulu from ala means mala or jara, means to oppress or to deviate from the right course. Adna Allah ta'ulu ay la tajuru or la tamilu. Do not deviate or do not oppress. So it means this is likelier. Adna means aqrab. This is likelier, closer, that you not be unfair by favoring one side and deviating from justice. So this alternative solution, that you may marry lawful women, 2, 3, or 4, and if you cannot keep justice only one, this is likelier that you will not be unfair to orphan girls. If you do not do this, and if you try to continue with marrying girl orphans, then of course that is oppression, that is injustice. Verse number 4, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً فَإِنْ طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. And give women their dowries as an obligation or as a gift. Now I will discuss what nihla mean, because it can be translated differently. And give women their dowries as an obligation or as a gift, but if they remit anything of it of their own accord, then consume it as something lawful and wholesome. No. Now, saduqat is different from sadaqat. Of course, some say they are from the same root, and they are. But saduqat is the plural of saduqa, not sadaqa, or sadaq, which means dowry. However, it's from the same. It has the same sense of sadaqa. Sadaqa is from sadq, truthfulness, and it shows that you are truthful in your faith when you give sadaqah, which of course the main instance of that is zakat and khums. When you give sadaqah, these are obligatory sadaqat, and there are of course voluntary sadaqat, which is charity. When you give sadaqah, it is a sign of your sadq, your truthfulness. And with regards to sadaq or sadaqah, it is a sign of your truthfulness to the contract of marriage, to your love for your wife, because this is not a price. It is sadaqah and it's nihla. Now, with regards to nihla, there are different views what it means, but altogether they come back to one meaning. So nihla is a gift given freely without any expectations. And those who say that this is an obligation, yes, of course, giving this gift to the wife is an obligation. It's not of a price for marriage or something like that. It's just a gift that Allah has given them and or has obliged you to give women when you want to marry them. So it means give their dowries as a bestowment without any reservation, without setting conditions, without unnecessary postponement, and without reducing from it. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ nihla. Now, I said there are other interpretations for nihla. Those who say this nihla means pure gift. Some have said that this is from nahl, which is honeybee. And he says that as honeybee gives this sweet gift to human race freely, you have to be like that, giving the sadaqah or mahr to your wives freely, and that would make the marriage sweeter. Oh, this is the idea of some commentators. So one meaning is gift, as I said. The other meaning is obligation and duty. That paying this to your wife is an obligation, faridah. Now, of course, as I said, it's faridah from Allah as a gift, to be given as a gift. Another meaning is debts. They have said that this is something that you owe to women, that you are indebted to wives. The dowry is like a debt that you have to give it. It cannot be waived by any condition unless, of course, the woman themselves want. Even if the woman passes away, the heirs of the woman can come and claim, because this belongs to her, and can come and claim her dowry. Another meaning for nihla, which is used commonly, is religion or a madhab. This book you certainly have heard, Al-Milal wal-Nihal, the religions and sects, so to speak. So nihla is a way of thinking in religion especially, and they say that this nihla has the same meaning here, meaning that this is something that the religion of God has obligated, that you have to pay. وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً, give them their dowries as obligation and as gift, unless if they, of course, forego and allow you to not pay or remit anything of it, that which we will discuss inshallah in our next session. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.